Good morning, everybody. A very good morning to all of you, and welcome to the Forum for the Future of Agriculture 2022. My name is Stephen Sackur. Some of you will recognize me. I've been here many times before to moderate and facilitate at this forum, in fact, going back for more than 10 years. Today, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Rose O'Donovan, whom many of you will know because she's editor-in-chief of AGRA, and I think it's fair to say Rose knows what she's talking about. Me, it's a little more dubious. But I always slip in at the very beginning of an FFA, I always slip in the fact that I am the son of a farmer. So even if you don't watch Hard Talk, even if you don't care about BBC News, I have that one sliver of credibility. I was born and raised on a farm. Let me begin by just saluting all of you for being here. As you all know, and I know very much as well, the last couple of years have made it very difficult for face-to-face conferencing, meetings, networking like this. It is such a pleasure, rather than doing this event online as I did for the last couple of years, it's such a pleasure to be here with you all face-to-face, a chance to chat and to meet and to have coffee. It makes such a big difference, and I thank you all for making the big effort to be here today. As ever, the overarching theme of this forum is teasing out the challenges of food production, of sustainable agriculture, of meeting the needs both of European and global consumers, and doing it in a way where we produce our food in a more sustainable, more environmentally compatible way. We'll be discussing that overarching challenge in different forums, in different panels, different settings, different contexts. But that ultimately is what we're all about, how to produce the food we need in a way that is sustainable for this planet of ours. I would also just say one other thing before I hand to Rose, and that is I am painfully aware of the context in which we're all meeting today, and I'm sure you all are too. The war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of a sovereign European nation. It's difficult to watch the coverage that my colleagues and many others who are based in Ukraine are giving us on our TV screens, radios, and newspapers. But I think not only is it painful and deeply upsetting, it also is deeply relevant to our discussion today, because after all, Ukraine is arguably the biggest, I think, wheat exporter in the world. So many different countries and so many different continents depend on the grain that comes from that breadbasket. And we know that food inflation is a global issue already. It's going to be made much worse by what is happening in Ukraine, and that is going to have ramifications across the global food production system. So I think that's something we'll probably weave into our discussion as well. So it's a difficult context that we operate in today. This debate, I think, is going to be very important. And to tell you a little bit more about how it's going to work, I'm going to hand to Rose.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. And I'd just like to point out as well that I'm also a farmer's daughter from Balladihov in West Cork. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Stephen said, my name is Rose O'Donovan, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Brussels-based publication AGRA. And looking out at the audience today, I would say that most of you are familiar with me and the work that I do. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my bi-weekly newsletter, I suggest that we meet in the margins later and have a drink and have a chat about that. But before we get cracking with today's full-on event, let me go through some housekeeping rules, if I may. Translation, ladies and gentlemen, is available in French. If you wish to avail of this service, please choose the appropriate channel on your headset if you're here with us in the square. And for those of you watching online, and a very warm welcome to you all too, you can choose the French link provided. You can, of course, follow the forum on Twitter at ForumforAg. And if you wish to tweet some comments, be sure to mention at our hashtag ForumforAg. As is the tradition over the past 15 years, we would like to make this forum as interactive as possible. And during the sessions, you will have an opportunity to ask a question either here in the room or online. Here at the square, you have two choices. Firstly, to raise your hand when we have Q&A sessions, and we will, of course, get one of the roving mics to you. Or if you think of a question during one of the sessions that Stephen and I are moderating, go onto your mobile phone to www.forumforag.live and enter your question. And all of these details are available on your badge. For those of you watching online, if you scroll down the page underneath the picture where Stephen and I appear, you can enter your question there, and that question will be transmitted to us here on the stage. Questions from the audience in the room need to be addressed to us in English, but for those of you watching online, they can be addressed in French, as we speak both fluent French, right, Stephen?
Oh, utterly fluent. Don't ask me to prove it, but...
And they will be translated and transmitted to us on the stage. I would invite you now, ladies and gentlemen, to silence your phones. I hope you find the forum both informative and interesting. And I look forward, for the first time, my debut appearance, to steering some of the discussions later on this morning. But for now, over to you, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Rose. And as Rose says, we do have some fantastic panels through the course of the day, and I'm very much looking forward to hosting and guiding the conversation alongside Rose. First, as is traditional, we're going to have a presentation, a keynote address from somebody very familiar to all of you. He's now been chair of FFA for some time. He brings a wealth of experience as a politician in his home country, Slovenia, as a former EU Commissioner for the Environment. He is, as I say, chair of the forum. So please give a very warm welcome to Janez Potočnik. Janez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'm the third in the row about coming from the farm. My father was also innkeeper, which probably explains why I like food and also wine. So, good morning and welcome to the 15th Forum of the Future of Agriculture on striving for food system transformation. This year, as we sit here in conference hall and behind our computers, we do so under the shadow of the conflict in Ukraine. The extent to which the terrible fighting will evolve is unknown and deeply worrying for all of us. And we fervently hope that diplomacy and goodwill can bring the crisis to a rapid end and allow Ukrainians and all those directly involved in this war to rebuild their lives. But first, I would like to extend our sincere condolences and support to those in and around Ukraine today who are suffering the consequences as we speak, and praise the work of all those who are working for peace and providing support for Ukrainians through these dark days. Ukraine and Russia, as you have heard, combined are important producers of wheat and animal feed, as well as fertilizers and natural gas. The substantial disruption to trade as a result of this conflict will inevitably create supply and price shocks throughout the global food chain. This will certainly be on the mind of all of us here today. It is paramount that we address the potential substantial knock-on effect this crisis will have on Europe's food system. And I know that the Commission and politicians are working hard on how to do this. But this conference is entitled Striving for Food System Transformation. And it is important that we maintain our focus on the issues which brought us today together and which remain at the core of the forum's mission, to contribute to realizing the vision of sustainable agriculture in harmony with nature, where farmers can enjoy a decent life and all have access to healthy, nutritious food. Some of you may remember my repetitive calls that the problems we face cannot be solved only by greening our current economic model, and that deeper system change transformation is needed. Unfortunately, this is heard and considered only when it becomes obvious, and when it is, in a way, already too late, in crisis situations like the COVID outbreak or the current Ukraine crisis. Today, politicians are calling on us consumers to save energy, which are similar to the calls to buy only the food we need, which we heard at the start of the pandemic. Today, the crying the cry is again to ensure food security. To be clear, food security is critically important, now even more than in days when everything seems to be running smoothly. But I continue to argue strongly that long-term, sustainable food security can only be achieved through food system transformation, which is at the heart of everything we have tried to integrate in this year's forum discussions. It is about changing the balance of crops produced for food and for animal feed, tipping it in favor of food for direct human consumption. It is about upscaling systems like agroforestry, which provide food and other ecosystem services like carbon sequestration at the same time. It is about taking a fresh look to the marine production systems that can also deliver multiple benefits. Aquaculture to produce seaweed and bivalves, it's a great option because these species absorb nutrients directly from the environment. They do not depend on feedstocks. It's about amazing agricultural technologies like precision agriculture, virtual farming, and production of meat analogs. They can indeed rely on expensive machinery, but we can see these technologies being offered to farmers through dematerialized product as a service business models, which is again very encouraging. The emergence of these new business models in the food system are breaking away from ingrained ways of thinking and working in order to create new or additional value through sustainability solutions shared throughout the food chain. It is about our care for pollinators. It is about our care for healthy soils. It is about how much of the food we still waste, which, if you think about it, it also means wasted water, energy, pesticides, fertilizers, and land used to produce that food. That is surely unacceptable from an economic and environmental, but also from the ethical perspective. But it is also about policies which are not directly related to food. It is, for example, about how much of the biofuels produced from food crops we use to fuel cars instead of feeding people. It is about how much of the fertile land we use for various expanding infrastructure projects. It's about how much of the fertile land is swallowed up by urban expansion and new space required by our resource-consuming mobility systems. And I can continue. All that is about food security. The more we ignore and avoid these strategic and sometimes difficult questions, including different trade-offs and delicate decisions, the more likely it is that crises will come back when we are least prepared to face them, requiring potentially even more dramatic responses. And yes, we are facing such a moment right now. We should definitely not ignore it, but we should finally learn that simply trying to manage the symptoms will not cure the diseases. And we should also finally understand how fragile our supply systems are, and therefore how much we depend on them. It has surely never been more important to combine supply-side policies with the demand-side and nature-based solutions. Reducing the need for virgin natural resources is the best competitiveness policy for a continent like Europe, dependent as we are on energy and many other materials, including food crops. If you are not convinced by the environmental and social arguments, then perhaps this argument will make you pause for thought. It is not new to any of us here in the room or listening at home that since the forum was established over 15 years ago, data on the climate and biodiversity have only worsened. And with each passing year, the need for food system transformation just becomes more urgent. Climate change and biodiversity loss are not at the root of this current conflict, but unless we work quickly to reverse the impact of our current food system on climate and biodiversity, we can be sure that future generations will be the victims of increasing conflicts down the line, the suffering being endured by the people of Ukraine brings sharply into the focus. So now it's the time to hold the nerve and not be swayed from the needed long-term path for food system transformation. The fundamental problem lies in our economic model. Economic theory depicts consumers and producers that are, at least in the short term, behaving rationally. The more we produce at the lowest possible price, the higher the profit, capital returns, and for the country, GDP growth. Over the last decades, resource use has contributed to significant improvements in living standards and human well-being in many parts of the world. But it now comes at an unprecedented cost to our climate, the environment, and human health. While once upon a time economic growth was an indicator of the quality of life of the inhabitants of the country, it is no longer so strongly correlated with increased well-being in high and upper middle income countries, the very countries who consume the most resources per capita. This clearly indicates that we need to rethink the North Star, leading our behavior and our policies. The Sustainable Development Goals were an important step in this direction, but ambitious policies that look to the long term, such as European Union Green Deal and the United Nations Climate Change Conference targets, are facing uphill battle as they endeavor to set our frameworks, incentives, and regulations to change how we produce and consume. Sending policy signals one way, whilst the market signals the other, it's creating confusion and intense lobbying as companies fear the loss of profitable markets. The Farm to Fork strategy, an implementation document of the European Green Deal for Agriculture and Food System, provoke strong opposition and also lobbying efforts. One could argue that there might be some improvements to be made on how the document was managed, but this does not change the fact that the document is addressing the right questions and setting a much-needed vision and direction for a food system transformation. The best impact assessment one can provide is the reality of environmental and social challenges we are facing and the need to address them without further delay. At the very heart of all the climate, environmental, and human health challenges we face today are natural resources. The more we mismanage them, the more we surpass our planetary boundaries, heat the climate, destroy biodiversity, and cause pollution. So it seems a logical step if we want to create a real systemic change to meet today's challenges head-on, because that is what is needed. We need to renew our focus on how we use natural resources. If we can look at our production and consumption through the lens of natural resource use, we can start to look at the transformation of the whole system rather than of a specific sector. And also focus on maximizing human needs and well-being instead of maximizing the production of sector outputs. This is actually a real message of hope, since by understanding well the drivers of the challenges we face, we can address all of them simultaneously together, create co-benefits and synergies, and avoid trade-offs and future lock-ins. So, what does that mean for agriculture? It means that we all need to understand the real impact of our production and consumption. To do this, we need a participatory approach to develop science-based impact data of the whole food chain, right from the start. The natural resources used to develop the seeds and the inputs and the machinery, the land, soil biodiversity, the processing, and so on. This can help us to design economic, social, and agricultural policies that incentivize solutions that encourage responsible resource use, nature-based solutions, and the transition to a circular bioeconomy. We need to stop giving producers the signals that eroding or destroying natural capital is free of charge, and stop confusing the consumers by asking them to behave responsibly by paying more for food with a low environmental impact and less for food with a higher ecological footprint. Much of the current focus today goes into addressing supply-side problems, as already mentioned, to optimizing, greening, cleaning the current economic model. Unfortunately, this, without deeper systemic change, will not be enough to meet 1.5 degrees, nor halt biodiversity loss. And we have no more luxury to lose any precious time. Let's take transport as example. Setting targets for zero-emission vehicles was hailed as a Glasgow breakthrough from the latest COP26. Indeed, it is an important and necessary step forward. But if transport had been looked at through the lens of systemic change and natural resource use, the discussion would have focused less on reducing the emissions from cars and more to what we need to fulfill the human need for mobility. This takes us beyond merely reducing emissions and encompasses policies such as town planning and incentive schemes for cyclists, reducing the number of cars required through car-sharing systems, public transport design, and so on, thereby addressing emissions, yes, but also resource use, pollution, and human health at the same time. We need to think the same way for agriculture. There are phenomenal advances taking place in changing the feed and bedding of livestock to reduce emissions, of developing technology to reduce inputs, and so on. And these innovations are a crucial part of the story. But again, tweaking the current system will not be enough. We need to consider system change. Regenerative agriculture could be key in this if taken seriously. It is a system of farming principles and practices that seeks to rehabilitate and enhance the entire ecosystem of the farm and improve the resources it uses rather than destroying or depleting them. I'm very aware that there is much debate about what regenerative agriculture should look like at the farm level. How far should it go? What should it encompass? And these are important details that we will need to work out together, not least backed up by science. But it can also be a form of agriculture that put the conservation of natural resources at its very heart, thus restoring biodiversity, supporting climate emission reductions, reducing pollution, and thereby supporting the future resilience of our agricultural system. It is also importantly a concept that is widely accepted amongst the majority of stakeholders. It presents solutions that we can work together to bring into action. This will be crucial, as for food system transformation to work, we all need to be on board and we all need to benefit. I'm therefore very excited today to hear our speakers' views on these issues and how they think we can bring about food system transformation. For those who have followed us over the years, you will have seen how the forum has evolved. We are here to provide the platform that brings together stakeholders from all options and backgrounds to express their views on the future of our food system and listen and learn from each other. Moving out of our silos and hearing the views and arguments of others is such an important step to moving together for food system transformation that we have now extended the forum well beyond the one annual event. Starting of yesterday, we have 12 online workshops which will delve further into some of the topics we introduced today. And I do urge you to visit the Forum website and sign up to those to continue the debate. In addition, do follow up to learn about the biannual ForumforAg that we hold across Europe. The more we work together, the more we listen to each other, the closer we'll be to working collaboratively to create an inclusive and just food system transformation. With this in mind, we are also delighted to announce that we have extended the partners behind the event, and therefore I would like to thank our funding partners, the European Landowners Organization, the Syngenta, our strategic partners, the Nature Conservancy, International Union for Conservation of Nature, Cargill, WWF, and Thought for Food, our international partner, the Chicago Council of Global Affairs, and our supporting partners, the Friends of the Countryside, John Deere, PepsiCo, Nestle, Indigo, the Reve Group, Systemic, and the Rice Foundation. Basically, everybody who you see back on the stage. As ever, a phenomenal amount of work goes into setting up the forum events. I would like to thank the speakers for joining our conservation. Once again, I think we have an extraordinary lineup of very high level and influential leaders and thinkers. And I think it is a testament to the importance of this issue and their motivation to find solutions. I would also like to thank our moderators, Stephen and Rose, for agreeing to steer us through these complex debates. And finally, of course, Emma and Caroline and their extraordinary team for putting all this together. To conclude, I'm an economist, and my major concern is that contemporary economy, it's considering us humans as external to nature and not part of it. Farmers are in a way privileged. You know you are part of nature since you know you depend on it. Protecting something you depend on, it's a common sense. And so is jointly creating conditions for farmers to have a decent life. Is there any good reason that we cannot embrace that simple wisdom and start behaving accordingly? Frankly, I do not see it, and this terrible war happening in the neighborhood doesn't change this. Dear friends, the time we enjoy on this planet is so short, and when you are in my age, it is crystal clear to you that the only thing which really matters is how and with whom you will spend your precious limited time. I'm here today since I still believe we can behave humanly to humans and naturally to nature and prove the very essence why we belong to humanity. Thank you for your attention. Take care, and I wish you enjoyable Forum days. Thank you.